Okay, go.
Welcome back to our study at John here at Marble Hill. This is our 4th week out of a 12-week study. Tonight is Jesus Expanding Ministry. This is May the 20th lesson. And let's go ahead and get started.
All right, when we look at the place of the passage, we're going to see 3 major encounters, 3 different people that Jesus talks to, and it's in the section of John chapter 2, verse 12 through chapter 4, verse 54, so there's quite a bit of reading to do this time, but a lot of good stuff. We're not going to go through all the verses as we go through here. We're going to do basically an overview, but we do encourage you guys to read these chapters because you'll get a lot more out of them. The first person we encounter, we know him as Nicodemus in John chapter 3, and we know that John chapter 3 is a very familiar scripture, but it is a conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus, who represents the Jewish establishment. He will also talk to the Samaritan woman, which is very controversial that he is speaking to a Samaritan woman, and then he will talk to a Gentile official.
So the big picture, only one way. There's only one way to heaven, only one way to God, and it's a common theme throughout the Bible, and John is going to hit it pretty hard. So add the word Jesus to all this, and Jesus takes away sin. Jesus calls disciples, and he also performs miraculous signs.
All right, the first set of scriptures we're going to look at involves Jesus cleansing the temple. There are 2 times in scripture where Jesus cleanses the temple. One of them happens really close to his crucifixion, the same week of his crucifixion. This one is the first one very close to after his first miracle has happened. So this is pretty much the first confrontational moment between Jesus and the Jewish religious leaders. What we see happening here is it's Passover. A lot of people are coming into Jerusalem for Passover. They come from all different places. Because of that, they have specific sacrifices they have to have. They also are supposed to give a specific tribute or donation to the temple when they come, and that has to be a Hebrew shekel. Because this is a Roman time period, they all have Roman money. So when they come to the temple, they are forced to have to change their money. And when they get in there, the money changers are charging them to do this, overcharging them. So they're basically gouging them. And also for the sacrifices that it's hard for them to bring with them all the way on their journey. And so they know that they have to have these sacrifices, and they're using that just to make profit off of them. This makes Jesus very angry. And through his righteous indignation, he turns over the money changers' tables, and he forms whips out of ropes, and he runs everybody out of there. And we always, I think, try to picture Jesus as this calm dude in everything that he does. But what we do see here is that he is expressing his authority as God. He comes into his house. He says, "My Father's house will not be a den of thieves. It is a house of prayer, and you're making it a den of thieves." And then after that, when he leaves there through that week of Passover, he does more signs and miracles. He starts getting a large following. This part that says that Jesus knows what is in man, as people begin to believe in him, it does say that he is not taking that to heart, but instead he is knowing what is in the heart of man. So he realizes that I'm not going to take all their praise to heart right now, because I know pretty much soon that they can change their mind. So he's not letting it kind of fill him what the praise of men can do.
All right. Teaches a Jew about salvation. So we kind of touched earlier on, this is John chapter 3. You get John 3:16 out of this. That's one of the more familiar scriptures that everybody probably has heard. So the bullet points here, it says, "You must be born again." So they're in Nicodemus and Jesus' conversation. He comes to him in the middle of the night instead of just coming up to him at daytime. So he could have a true conversation with him. Most likely, it doesn't say exactly why or he's doing this, but he's a Jewish leader, so he can't really be seen with the guy who is supposed to be changing all of Jewish history, especially when they don't like it. But he knows what the prophecy says and the scripture says, so he's wanting to know more and see if this is real. For God so loved the world, that's John 3:16, he gave his only begotten Son, for whoever believeth in him shall be saved and not perish, and have everlasting life. And Nicodemus is wanting that. He knows about it, but then he's talking with Jesus and he wants it more and more. And then John the Baptist exalts Christ. So after the conversation with Nicodemus and Christ, we go to this scene of baptism, and this group of people is asking, hey, don't you care that Jesus is taking your followers away? And John simply says that, I need to be less and Christ needs to be more. So it's fine. That's where I was trying to lead them anyways.
All right, and now we're going to look at Jesus teaches a Samaritan about salvation. So the Samaritans, they have different beliefs of how to worship, and it's a very controversial time. There's a racial issue between the Jews and the Samaritans. So this Samaritan woman, she would have been looked down upon, not only because of being a Samaritan in this area, but also just because of her lifestyle, as we'll see here in a moment. And so she comes to the well in the middle of the day, the heat of the day. Most people would come and draw water at a cooler time instead of having to carry a large pot of water back to their house during the heat of the day. But she was trying to avoid people. And Jesus comes up to her, and it surprises her that he would even talk to her. He asks her for a drink, and and then he ends up offering to her that he can give her living water. She's very kind of confused by this statement, and she wants to know more about this living water, that you'll never thirst again. That sounds amazing. Yes, I would love to never be thirsty again. And he says, okay, well, go get your husband and I will tell you all about it. And she's kind of, oh, I don't have a husband. And he goes, oh, that's right, because the guy who you're with now is not your husband, but you've had 5 before. And so in this moment, she's taken back, obviously, and she says, I perceive you're a prophet. So do you think we should worship on the mountain? So she completely, instead of just in that moment also recognizing who Christ is, she goes back to the worship issue between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people of, well, which way is the right way to worship? We worship on the mountain, you all worship in the temple. Which way should we worship? And he says the time is coming when it's not going to matter where you worship, because you'll worship in spirit and in truth, because God is a spirit. And so he reveals to her that he is the Christ, he's the Son of God. And she leaves her water pot, her whole purpose for being there, and she runs and she tells everyone she knows that I have met a man who's told me all I've ever done, and he is the Christ.
All right, so ministry by deed. Let's see this. All right, Jesus heals an official's son. This is a Roman official. He comes to Christ wanting his son to be healed. Come heal my son, come heal my son. And, at this point, Jesus is a little distracted, not that he doesn't have time for this, but I'm supposed to be doing some other stuff. And I don't, the guy coming up to him was not really as sincere as other people like that had come up. Now his sincerity does change. Jesus says, go and your son will be healed. And the man leaves right away, and he gets home, and everybody's like, sir, your son, he's better. What time did he get better? Oh, that's the exact same time that Christ told me to come home to my son. So at that point, he knew exactly any doubt that he had back here when he first was with Christ is gone. And it said that the entire house was saved. So much like you hear today, if a father or husband gets saved, the likelihood of the house getting saved is very high percentage versus if he's not.
All right, so we're going to look at the discussion questions, and we really look forward to digging deeper with you guys on these on the Zoom call. I'm not going to read all of these all the way through because they're pretty long, but we will touch on each one of these sections of scripture that we have gone over. So if you have your books, you can be looking through those. If nothing else, try to read through the scripture so that you're prepared for whenever we're able to do our call Wednesday at 6:30.